A huge march for freedom in Barcelona. Catalonia is shut down in protest at jail sentences for independence leaders. Lives are more important than a criminal. Mexico's president backs the decision to release El Chapo's son. And Haitian protesters blame the United States for propping up President Jovenel Moïse. Hello and welcome to Telesur. I'm Carla Gonzalez in Quito, and this is From the South. We begin in Catalonia, where hundreds of thousands of demonstrators have arrived in Barcelona for what is called a March for Freedom. Protesters were heard chanting "Freedom for political prisoners" as they waved their flags. Some of the marchers began their trek on Wednesday from municipalities across the northeastern Spanish region. This is the fifth day of mass protests against the jail sentences handed out to 9 independence leaders. Earlier, protesters in Catalonia blocked traffic on 2 routes connecting Spain and France as the general strike got underway across Catalonia. The protesters set up barricades on the AP7 motorway at La Jonquera near the city of Gerona in eastern Spain, as well as on the N2 road near the border. Our correspondent, John Ortiz, has been following the protests in Barcelona.
This general strike has developed peacefully so far. People have been blocking roads, there have been demonstrations all over Catalonia, and now a huge march and rally is underway in the center of Barcelona. Last night and in the early hours of the morning, there were a number of violent incidents, not only in Barcelona, but in other towns and cities of the region. It is worth explaining who these young people are who have been protesting, setting up barricades and lighting fires in the streets. Some of the media have been describing one group as anarchists, including some who have allegedly come here from France and Germany. But the online outlet El Público says many of those provoking violence are police infiltrators. That would certainly be a scandal if it were to be confirmed. On a different note, the former Catalan president Carles Puigdemont has presented himself to the Belgian prosecutors after a Spanish judge reactivated a European arrest warrant for him. However, the Belgian prosecutors ruled that he can remain in freedom there, but he will have to ask for permission if he wants to leave Belgium. Of course, he has been traveling quite a lot as he wants to spread the campaign internationally.
That was John Ortiz from Barcelona. On Thursday night, police opened fire with rubber bullets on protesters in Catalonia. They had gathered near the Spanish government headquarters in Barcelona. Reports said dozens were injured, including journalists and medical staff. There has been fierce repression of demonstrations every night since Monday, when the Supreme Court's sentences were announced. And groups of pro-unionist fascists brandishing weapons and Franco-era flags marched through Barcelona with impunity during the night, attacking independence activists. The president of the Catalan parliament, Roger Torrent, has questioned how the radical right wing were able to cross half the city in order to attack supporters of the Catalan sovereignty movement. Members of the Committees for the Defense of the Republic said that they managed to disarm a fascist wielding a knife and the flag of Spain under the Franco dictatorship. In Mexico, police in the city of Culiacán have been forced to free a son of the jail drug leader Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán. This after gunmen from the Sinaloa cartel launched an intense assault on security forces who had detained him. Fierce gun battles broke out between police and the gunmen in the city on Thursday afternoon after news spread that a police patrol had detained Ovidio Guzmán. Videos posted on social media showed images of heavily armed gunmen roaming the city in pickup trucks. As more gunmen from the Sinaloa cartel headed towards the city, the police said they were outnumbered and freed El Chapo's son in order to pacify the city. El Chapo is currently serving a life sentence in the United States, but Culiacán was for many years the base of the Sinaloa cartel, which he built into the most powerful drug trafficking organization in the world. During the clashes, more than 30 inmates escaped from the city's Aguaruto prison. Residents said the prisoners were going to fight for the cartel. Security Minister Alfonso Durazo said the government decided to release Ovidio Guzman in order to avoid loss of life.
Today, at 15:30 hours, a patrol composed of 30 elements of the National Guard and Sedena were conducting a routine patrol in the Tres Rios neighborhood of the city of Culiacán, Sinaloa, when they were attacked from a house. Patrol personnel repelled the assault and took control of the house, locating 4 occupants inside. During this action, one of them was identified as Ovidio Guzman Lopez. This led to several organized criminal groups surrounding the house with a force greater than that of the patrol. Likewise, other related groups carry out violent actions against citizens in different parts of the city, generating a situation of panic.
And Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador said he supported the security officials in the decision to release El Chapo's son.
They took decisions which I back, which I endorse, because the situation was very difficult and the lives of many citizens, of many human beings, were at risk. And they decided to protect those lives. And I agree with that. We don't want massacres. That is over. Catching a criminal can't be more important than people's lives. They took that decision, and I support it.
In other news, Ecuador's government says it is breaking off talks with one of the country's main workers' union. The FUT had said it will reignite demonstrations, this time against labor reforms.
We are calling a general mobilization for the 30th of this month to take action and mobilize and gather in the provinces all across the Republic. The government doesn't want peace. The government wants mobilizations. So we will continue with the mobilizations. We are calling on the Ecuadorian people from the fields and from the cities, on the indigenous people and civil society. The Ecuadorian people are not a joke to anyone. We can't be mute, because here there is no resolution. First, we have to deal with the actual economy of the Ecuadorian people and the austerity measures that are about to come. Second, we demand an explanation on what the decree is actually good for. And third, we demand an explanation of the labor reforms this decree entails. Peace is made by talking and not by creating conflicts.
Students in Colombia have been protesting against President Iván Duque's plans to reform labor and pension laws, as well as privatization proposals. Students, trade unions, and indigenous organizations took to the streets across Colombia's most important cities. The Colombian Education Workers Federation said the measures would affect young workers and weaken pensions. The protesters also rejected what they called the government's failure to comply with the 2016 peace agreements. And peaceful protesters were met by police repression when security forces used violence against some of the demonstrators who were carrying flowers. The students were calling for an end to the murders of social leaders across the country. Another indigenous leader has been assassinated in the northeast of Colombia. 2 armed men murdered the Wayuu leader Oneida Epiayu in a restaurant in the city of Riohacha in the department of La Guajira. 4 more people were injured, including her son and husband, and have been taken to a hospital. Their current status is unclear. The Colombian NGO Institute for Development and Peace says that from 2016 to September, 777 indigenous leaders and human rights defenders have been killed in the country. So far this year, that figure is 156. Colombia will be holding regional elections on October 27th, but the campaign has been marked by violence on a scale not seen in recent years.
With just a week to go before regional elections in Colombia, the organization Peace and Reconciliation has presented a detailed analysis of electoral violence across the country in the period from October the 27th, 2018 to October the 11th this year.
Today we have 230 victims, of which 22 are murderers. The rest are attacks, threats and other kinds of violence. This is double of what we saw in the 2015 elections. Another aspect is that it's not just one ideology or political party that is being attacked. Most of the victims are from the opposition coalition led by Colombia Humana and the Green Party, but the ruling coalition led by the Democratic Center has also been attacked. The traditional parties are the ones that have the fewest victims.
The report points out that there are several kinds of killers involved. 80% of the incidents are carried out by unknown hired gunmen, while the other 20% are carried out by paramilitary groups, ELN guerrillas and FARC dissidents. The violence has affected at least 28 of Colombia's 32 departments.
The violence is concentrated mainly in 5 departments: La Guajira, Cauca Valley, Cauca, Tolima and Antioquia. This tells us that there is no simple correlation between electoral violence and areas abandoned by the FARC. Because in the north of the Cauca Valley, for example, there was no presence of the FARC, yet it is one of the main focuses of violence this year.
The situation has become worse as the regional elections approach on October the 27th. Attacks and intimidation against candidates are increasing. A week ago, there were attacks on the headquarters of left-wing parties in Bogotá, where security should be tighter.
We don't have any clear information about who was responsible. We know that this place is extremely well protected. So, we are very concerned about how it was possible for them, in the center of Teusaquillo, to carry on an attack on the headquarters of the Communist Party and the Patriotic Union 8 blocks away, and 10 or 15 minutes later to get into our offices. And absolutely nothing happens to them, and no one is arrested.
The political coalition of the left in Colombia is demanding urgent guarantees for its political activity. And since the investigations have made no progress, they assume the security services are not taking action. They're requesting the presence of the European Union and the OAS at the elections to ensure that they can take part in peace.
We'll take a short break, but after this, flooding kills 5 and forces hundreds to flee in Ivory Coast. More on this when we come back. Welcome back. Dozens of people gather outside the U.S. Embassy in Haiti to protest against the country's support for the Jovenel Moïse administration. The protesters, including leaders of various opposition parties, accused the U.S. government of interfering in Haiti's internal affairs. They have since demanded that the White House respects Haiti's right to self-determination and allow its citizens to decide their own destiny.
It's the Americans who are keeping President Jovenel Moïse in power. I cannot take the long road to denounce this, but instead I came here directly so the world can see us and we can bring the news, to tell them that it's the U.S. Embassy that is keeping President Jovenel Moïse in power.
Guyana's President David Granger will head to Cuba on Saturday as he continues to receive cancer treatment. He disclosed this on the sidelines of the accreditation ceremony for Germany's first woman ambassador to the country on Thursday. President Granger told reporters that every 90 days he has to go to Havana for a checkup. Last year he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma and has undergone several rounds of radiotherapy treatment. Doctors had reportedly given him the all clear in July. Meanwhile, the 77-year-old is expected to lead his party into the March 2020 regional and general elections. Trinidad and Tobago's Labour Minister Jennifer Baptiste Primus has announced that she is bowing out of politics ahead of local and general elections. She dropped the bombshell while addressing the dinner and awards ceremony of the Cooperative Credit Union movement, which falls under her line ministry.
As the Minister, and I should say as your outgoing Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development, yes, because we all have to prepare. I am one of those persons who prepare every phase of my life. God bless me to serve you for a 5-year period, and I am making sure that the foundation that I lay and the baton that I have created will be handed over to the next Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development to continue his or her journey across the landscape of Trinidad and Tobago, and I would fade merrily and happily into the sunset with Mr. Primus.
At least 5 people have died and hundreds forced to leave their homes due to severe flooding in Abidjan in several cities in Ivory Coast. This as a result of torrential rains which led to many roads being blocked and sinkholes forming beneath some streets. Emergency agencies and the armed forces have continued the search for more casualties as the heavy rains persist. More than 100 people have been rescued and are in shelters.
The water got into the houses. We started putting things away a little bit. We couldn't save much. A lot of things have been left in the house. We have lost a lot of things. We were only able to get the children's clothes out and some for ourselves because given the water level, we couldn't get much out.
President Nicolás Maduro has hailed Venezuela's election to the United Nations Human Rights Council as a triumph over pressure and conspiracies from the United States.
Tremenda victoria de Venezuela.
It's a tremendous victory for Venezuela. We faced the plots, the conspiracies, the brutal campaign of the U.S. government of Donald Trump, a campaign of pressure, of persecution against the countries of the world government, in addition to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, calling governments, treating countries, but they weren't able to stop us. Not even with threats, blackmail, or with a global campaign, the government of the United States and imperialism were able to strike down Venezuela. The Lima Group couldn't either. We have seen a great victory of dignity, truth, morality, and we will sit on the Council of the Human Rights of United Nations.
Chilean students are protesting against an increase in subway fares. Hundreds of demonstrators forced their way into a metro station in Santiago without paying for their tickets. The new fares mean people have to pay more than $1 for each trip, making it one of the most expensive subway tickets in the region. The authorities condemned the protest and entered the station to repress them. Bolivia prepares for its presidential election on Sunday, so let's take a look at how women have won recognition of their rights in the last decade.
The new constitution of 2009, a product of a constituent assembly, opened the doors to state recognition of women's rights and demands.
The state's political constitution created an opportunity to advance within the legal framework. Specific laws on women's rights, such as the integral law to ensure women's life freedom from violence, the law against human trafficking and smuggling, Law 243 against political harassment and violence, are an example of that.
Up until a decade ago, in this country, women were restricted from owning land in rural areas.
When President Evo Morales came to power, only 15% of the land titles were in the name of women. Today, 46% of agrarian titles are held by women.
All of these changes have been experienced and felt by campesina women themselves.
This never happened with previous governments. For example, that an indigenous woman, for example, I am Quechua, could be seen in parliament or similar positions.
We're empowering women. Now it's 50-50. We now have women and assembly members as councillors, as deputies.
It really is a process of change. That is why we say now that we have the same rights as men.
With this process, Bolivia has been recognized throughout the world and by international organizations.
Bolivia is the third country in the world with the greatest political participation of women after Rwanda and Cuba. But not only because they are women, but because they have a lot of voice with a lot of decision-making power both in the lower house and in the upper house.
The recognition and exercise of women's rights in society is affirmed and has been an important investment for the short term.
Beyond the fact that political participation is a right, the fact that there are women visible but also with strong voices make girls dream that they too can go far and that they too can reach that in the future.
The new and advanced legislation, according to experts and women's rights activists, is not enough, but it is a step towards demanding the full implementation and exercise of these rights and reducing gender-based violence.
Coming up, Turkey now threatens to restart military operations in Syria if the Kurds don't withdraw. Stay with us.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Thank you for joining us again. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been bashing phones in an attempt to persuade MPs to vote for his new Brexit deal. The proposal will be put to Parliament in a special session on Saturday. But all the opposition parties and the Northern Irish DUP have said they will vote against. Pablo Navarrete reports.
On Thursday morning, it was announced that the British government of Boris Johnson and the European Union have agreed a new Brexit deal. Now, this will be put to the British Parliament in a special meeting on Saturday, where Boris Johnson will need approximately 320 votes to get the deal passed, barring any abstentions. Now, both sides have lauded, both the British government and the European Union have lauded this deal, but it does leave open the prospect of Boris Johnson having to seek an extension should it not be passed, although Boris Johnson has been adamant that the Brexit date of 31st of October, next Thursday, is the deadline, and Britain will be leaving. Equally, the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, has said that there will be no more extensions. Now, he actually does not have the power to unilaterally enforce this. It's up to the 27 leaders of the European Union, and the British Parliament has passed legislation demanding that Boris Johnson look for an extension should he not get a deal that's acceptable to Parliament. So Boris Johnson's team will be furiously lobbying to try and get that 320 votes he needs on Saturday for his part. Jeremy Corbyn, the socialist leader of the Labour Party, has condemned the deal, said it's a bad deal, bad for worker rights for the NHS, and has called on Labour to oppose it. Equally, the Democratic Unionist Party won't be voting, allies of Johnson won't be voting for it, saying that it doesn't guarantee them a veto in the Northern Ireland Assembly. So the Johnson government is furiously lobbying now to try and get this new Brexit deal passed on Saturday.
That was Paolo Navarrete from London. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has threatened to restart the operation against Kurdish forces in Syria next Tuesday if they do not withdraw from his designated safe zone. On Thursday, Turkey agreed to suspend its offensive in northern Syria for 5 days while Kurdish fighters pull out from the area.
Salı akşamına kadar.
If the United States keeps its promise to us by Tuesday night, at the end of 120 hours, the issue of the safe area will have been resolved. But if this promise is not fulfilled, without any exception, the minute this time is up, the operation Source of Peace will resume where it stopped, and with even more determination.
And in the Turkish border town of Akçakale, residents have shared their thoughts on the ceasefire agreement. The Turkish military offensive has left hundreds killed and injured, with more than 160,000 people having to flee.
We were forced to leave our villages because of the offense. They forced a demographic change that affected Turkmen minorities. They burned our homes and they took our lands. Now we are happy and hopeful with the entrance of the Turkish military and the Syrian National Army to our lands to liberate us from this gang.
And for our last story, Cuba's best-known ballet dancer Alicia Alonso has died at the age of 98. Co-founder of the Cuban School of Ballet, Alonso received countless awards, among them the National Dance Prize in Cuba and the Gold Medal of the Circle of Fine Arts of Madrid. Alonso was acknowledged by leaders around the world during her artistic career. So we'll leave you with more of the great Alicia Alonso in honor of her dedication to the world of arts. Until next time.